South Korea is one of few countries that have not locked down the entire national border and cities while successfully flattening the COVID-19 curve by carrying out swift and extensive testing, focused contact tracing, and the selective quarantine and treatment of the infected. This focused containment approach is basically supported by a well-organized infectious disease control and prevention system, a highly advanced information technology, and the public health system. Swift and extensive testing was possible by an efficient decision-making and administrative backup by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, KCDC, to encourage fast development of COVID-19 detection kits and other medical supplies. Rapid testing helps fast finding of infected people and their surroundings, which are crucial to identify those contacted with the infected and hotspots of the infection. Effective tracing is carried out by what is called the COVID-19 Smart Management System, consisting of 28 public and private organizations, such as National Police Agency, the Credit Finance Association, 3 major mobile phone companies, 22 credit card companies, and KCDC. This public and private cooperative network for the COVID-19 control runs the contact tracing system by using 28 organizations' data to trace COVID-19 infection. The center informs the local public health center near the infected individual's residence, and the health center circulates the notifications not only to those contacted them, but also to the public, while personal information of the infected is kept anonymous. Those confirmed positive are hospitalized at the COVID-19 special facilities. Some of them are public and others are private. If any facilities and places are spotted by the infected, they should be ordered to be blocked, and relevant performances, assemblies, religious ceremonies, or any other large gathering of people may be restricted and prohibited. As the mysterious religious group called Shincheonji Church was at the center of COVID-19 outbreak in Korea, especially in the city of Daegu, at least in its first stage, religious ceremonies were strictly restricted voluntarily and by administrative orders. Karaoke rooms, internet cafes, and nightclubs were also ordered to be closed or abide by highly stringent sanitary requirements. All these measures are based primarily upon the Infectious Disease Control and Prevention Act, restructured after the 2015 MERS outbreak. This highly intensive infectious disease control and prevention system has naturally raised human rights issues, especially how such an effective combination of testing, tracing, treatment could be harmonized with the protection of relevant human rights, such as the right to privacy, the freedom of movement, the freedom of worship, and the freedom of occupation and business of those targeted by administrative measures. This task of striking a balance between pressing social needs to cope with the pandemic and the protection of human rights was guided by the government's principle of openness, transparency, and democracy in terms of quarantine policy. Comprehensive lockdown approach would yield too much damages to total population's daily lives and of all social and economic systems, and cause serious discrimination and exclusion of certain religion and social classes. Having said that, the remaining options in fighting the spread of very infectious diseases would be either selective isolation of the infected or natural quarantine by giving up total prevention. As we all know, the latter approach has a danger of mass deaths, especially the deaths of socially and physically weak people, like the elderly and the patients of other diseases. We have to consider the seriousness of the pandemic. It does not mean the state of emergency can be a rationale for avoiding ordinary rule of law mechanism. The principle of proportionality or the prohibition of excessive restriction should be applied in this situation too. However, it should also be considered that the security is the premise of human rights, so that we have to concentrate on the danger to our security unless the core of human rights can be infringed. Effectiveness of the focused containment policy as opposed to comprehensive lockdown policy can be considered against the possible loss of privacy and other freedoms. The danger of abuse and misuse of quarantine powers should be countered by transparent and democratic uses of powers instead of total negation of such powers. The professional administrative agency with the scientific and the communicative capabilities can get widespread trust and comprehensive support from the general public by successfully implementing the principle of transparency and democracy. The restraints on human rights, such as privacy, could be minimized by the proportionate and flexible administrative measures depending upon the severity and the speed of epidemics and the conditions of the suspected cases. For example, anonymous and free testing are provided to encourage testing of illegal immigrants and sexual minorities who might be vulnerable to legal sanctions and the social discrimination. Some would show worries about the effective information management system that can be misused and easily abused by public authorities and cause severely intrusive surveillance. However, transparent and democratic mechanism may diminish the dangers. The personal information of the infected was very strictly controlled by KCDC and authorities only for the purpose of disease control and prevention. For example, only infection investigators of KCDC are permitted to access personal information like the location information, and as soon as the outbreak comes to the end, the information used for the contact tracing should be discarded. The authorities accepted the suggestion of anonymous testing from civil activist groups, including voluntary associations of sexual minorities, which helped a lot control the spread of COVID-19 mediated at nightclubs in Itaewon early May. What must be trusted in this regard is voluntary cooperation of the people in terms of social distancing and medical support. Without such voluntarism, administrative measures could not effectively cope with the epidemics. Although some toughest and administrative and even penal measures to those failed to abide by quarantine rules have been taken, basically most people's voluntary participation in social distancing and very moderate reaction to the rapid spread of social and medical fields seem to help avoid comprehensive lockdown with relatively successive control of the spread of COVID-19 so far in Korea. I believe that a task of constitutional law from now on is to develop a new paradigm on the role and the status of state and society to answer to the question of how to conceive and respond to this new challenge in managing transnational disasters and its accompanying restraints of human rights across the globe. Thank you, and I wish you all a good health and safety.